Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo!
Before we get into today's episode, I have to tell you about Daily Harvest. If you are not aware about Daily Harvest, listen up. Daily Harvest makes it super easy for you to add fruits and vegetables to your day. As you know, I am one to promote a fruit or a vegetable at most meals because it's going to make you feel good and it's going to give you the nutrients that you need. Now, sometimes adding fruits and vegetables can be easy, but there's other times we don't feel like washing, cutting, prepping, chopping, cooking, all the things. So it's really super convenient when you have this stuff in your freezer that also tastes good. The best part about Daily Harvest is not only do they use a variety of fruits and vegetables, they also include some sort of a unique ingredient that, to be honest, I'm not usually one to purchase or buy just because they're kind of hard to find or the price point's too high. So it's really great that amongst these fruits and vegetables, they have other really cool nutrient dense ingredients that maybe I wouldn't be, keen to try on my own, but it tastes really good inside of these products. So with that said, they have smoothies, harvest bowls, flatbreads, soups, and more. I have not tried something yet that I did not like. They're super convenient. You can leave them in your freezer. They don't go bad. They're super fresh, super delicious. And like I said, a super easy way. Did I say super a lot? A super easy way for you to get in the nutrients, the flavors, and all of the balanced items that you need. So if you have not tried Daily Harvest yet, make sure you go to the link in my show notes or just go to dailyharvest.com and put in Tips with Tony at checkout for $40 off your first box of Daily Harvest. So go to the link in the show notes, use Tips with Tony at checkout for $40 off your first box. Enjoy! Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for our next guest. I have virtually in front of me, Jared Hamilton. He is a coach and podcast host of Dieting from the Inside Out. So if we don't love that title and we're not super excited to hear more about what he has to say, I know I am. So anyways, Jared, welcome to the podcast.
What's up? I appreciate you having me on. This is cool.
Yeah. My pleasure. I'm so excited. We just chatted for like 20 minutes before even hitting record because, the world of nutrition is very small. And I think like where we are in the middle of the, big differences between like diet culture and anti-diet. And we try to like find that small little balance. There's not many of us in that space. So it was really cool to connect. And I'm so excited to get into today's episode. I would love for you to introduce yourself with the listeners by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I appreciate you having me on. And you're right. There's not a lot of people in this middle ground. I could probably list 2 or 3. So now I know another one and it makes my heart happy. So who I am, my name is Jared Hamilton. I'm 31 from the Midwest. I always say the cool things about me is I'm a dog dad times 3. So I've got 3 fur babies. I have an amazing wife who tolerates my terrible jokes, which is always a plus. Love talking. So I'm a podcast host. I'm a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, which basically means I just like to roll around with other men wearing angry pajamas, but that's fine. But then the biggest thing is what I do is I have been helping people never struggle losing their weight ever again. That's like my one thing when they're like, what do you do? Because I feel like nutrition coach isn't quite accurate, or fitness coach or whatever. Like people are like, what is your title? Like we were talking is I'm a coach. But the big thing is my one claim to fame or my one whatever is I'm really good at helping people never struggle losing weight ever again and making this game ridiculously simple because my favorite thing to do is implement it's the name of the show is Dieting from the Inside Out, because this is the big reason why is because it's the missing piece. I do what I do because I want to help create permanent change in people's lives, because I see way too many people settle. They think they are hopeless or lost cause, or they've had years or decades of struggle. So in their heads, they're like, I guess I'm stuck here. Hate that. I don't think anyone should ever settle in any area of their life. But then number 2 is the permanent change. We see in the world of diet culture, everyone like fights the same 10 pounds for 10 years, or they do great for maybe 6 months, maybe if that. And then something happens, they fall back. Even the majority of our clients like have worked with other coaches. They got the result but they never fixed the inner foundation of what makes up who someone is. Then it's no wonder the quote unquote old self comes in and ruins everything and sabotages. So that's like my dating profile, if you will.
What made you get into it? Like, did you have your own story? Did you just always love fitness? Like, what's your why behind what you did?
Yeah. So I found this space on a complete accident. So I grew up as a very awkward, uneducated homeschool kid. So, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, struggled growing up with, one, being fat. I was a fat kid from day one. Always struggled with my weight, always struggled with my own stuff. Then when I got a little bit older, decided I want to not be fat. I struggled with all the things, the binge eating, the emotional eating, sabotage, like all the things that I teach. It's like, unconsciously, I'm like trying to be the coach that I would have needed back when I was younger. You know what I mean? I feel like we all do that. Like who we are is the person we would have needed the most, Yeah. But for me, so I always struggled with that. So at the time it was like, why me? Why do I have to be like this? But fast forward years, it's now I can relate to the people that I serve, So, but I found the coaching business and doing what I do for a living now completely on an accident, because growing up, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I found martial arts at a really young age, like 13 to 18, and fell in love with how the human body worked. Biomechanics was just like nerdy as can be to me. So I was really fascinated. So what's every person do? I want to go to school to be a physical therapist. I swear everyone has that story. So fast forward, was going to go down that rabbit hole, but it wasn't because I was passionate. It was just because it was like, what can I do that's most tolerable for the rest of my life that makes okay money, which is totally the worst way to approach a career in this. So what can I like?
Well, a lot of people do.
Right. So I went that route, but thankfully I did, because during one of the prereqs for my coursework was a personal trainer class. Fell in love with personal training. So I totally went the fitness route, like screw physical therapy, went the trainer route. I've always been entrepreneurial since I was a real little kid. So I basically built an in-person training business. So this is like the stereotypical meathead story of how I feel like all my friends started. Well, fell in love with that, ended up growing my in-person business to like, I was training like 200 sessions a month, 430A to 9P life, like craziness. Would never trade it for the world, but just unsustainable, crazy stuff. Yeah. Well, right around, and I did that for like 5 years. Then right around that time, I found some people like Jordan Syatt, ended up learning how to build the online coaching business from people like him, and then transitioned to found this cool thing called Instagram. Blew up on Instagram, built my whole coaching business from Instagram, which is really dangerous now that I think back. But but then, and one thing led to another, then I scaled my coaching business and have been online for the last like 5 or 6 years. So that's kind of how I got here. Now, as far as what led me to this like inner game stuff, is it was a complete accidental observation. So I had my own journey with therapy. I still go to therapy to this day with the inner game, with all of this stuff. It was my own stuff, my own traumas I worked through, my own relationship with food, all that stuff. Because a lot of the stuff that I struggled with, like binge eating, sabotage, relationship with food, all avoidance, all that stuff, I struggled with that with food back in the day. But then when I got into business for myself, I did it with business. So instead of emotional eating, I traded it for emotional working, which is, I think, even more dangerous, because then you get a really cool result upon suppression. So, but that's when I dove into personal development, therapy, emotional regulation, all of that stuff, meditation, all the things. So, but then I scaled the coaching business. So now we're working with lots of people and all these things. But then I noticed a pattern, because what I used to do is, because the way that we coach was just what I would label sustainable weight loss. People come in, we're going to sustainably teach them how to lose their weight and keep it off, which is great. But it was still, I would argue, surface level.
Yeah.
Well, I noticed a pattern. Let's say Jane Doe would come in and I'm like, all right, let's take her into weight loss. Ooh, Jane Doe binge eats every other day. All right, I have to fix binge eating. Okay, fixed her binge eating, got her to lose weight. Then take her into weight loss. She's good. Then next client, like John Doe comes in. We're doing great. Oh, identity issues are sabotaging his stuff. Got it. Okay, I have to teach him how to fix his identity, rewrite that, do all the neurological pathway stuff. Cool, fix that. Now we can go into weight loss. That started happening person after person after person.
Yeah.
And it hit me. I go, this is mainstream. because right around that time, I really dove into this, like behavioral patterns, psychology. Psychology fascinates me. Relationship with food, how we think, the brain, Joe Dispenza stuff, all this crazy world of like personal development and these things. But then I saw where it was missing in the coaching space, because by then I've been coaching for a hot minute, and I started unconsciously doing this with clients. As they would get into the program, I'm like, I got to do this other stuff with them to even get them ready to lose weight. Because logically, if someone's binge eating and sabotaging and have a horrible relationship with food, me throwing weight loss success on the other side is the worst idea ever, because they're not ready for it. Right. So I go, I would scramble, fix all that stuff, then take them into weight loss. Then it hit me. Oh my gosh, this is mainstream. Because here's what's ironic, how the way the universe works. Right around that time, I was getting really burned out with coaching. I didn't feel aligned with the way that I didn't feel aligned with the industry. I didn't feel aligned with how I coached. I just didn't, it just, what I used to love started to feel heavy. And then, I actually went on my own little sabbatical because it was really bothering me. So a mentor of mine taught me, when you do not feel aligned, you just need to go get quiet and stay quiet and like let whatever comes up, come up. Well, I did that, and I took like a whole weekend. I got an Airbnb out on a farm somewhere with this little like dwarf horse. It was great. And I got all the clarity in that little weekend, and it hit me, and I go, oh, I need to rebuild everything. So I rebuilt this. I rebranded the podcast to Dieting from the Inside Out, or even inside our coaching program, the very first stage is called Dieting from the Inside Out. You can't go into fat loss till you diet from the inside out first. I redid everything, and then built entire systems. Cause inside all of this, like, here's a system for fixing your relationship with food. Here's how to stop binge eating. Here's how to fix your, whatever inner child is, applies to weight loss, mental health and weight loss, like all these different things. Dove headfirst into all that, and never felt more aligned in my life. And then obviously the client results went crazy. Then the podcast blew up, and like everything just, it was the missing piece that was needed. So that's kind of how it all ended up here.
Yeah, because the reality is that sustainable weight loss literally cannot happen. So, and we've all been guilty of this in our, I don't want to say all, but like, I feel like a majority of coaches, they get in, they want, especially when you're in business, you want to tell clients what they want to hear, and you want to help them to like, lose weight sustainably, blah, blah, blah. But like you said, if there's that foundation's not there, it's actually not sustainable. So although, and I say this all of the time, you can take someone and you can have them do all of the healthy habits in the world. You can have them eat balanced meals, hydrate with water, exercise regularly, all of the things, and even a quote unquote healthy balance plan, not one that's restrictive or cut in the extremes, even that on a foundation of a diet mindset, it is not sustainable. Yeah. Like, if you don't first deal with your mindset, and if you don't first build that foundation, if you don't first heal your relationship with food in your body, it's not going to work in the long run. So, what you're doing is exactly what people need. Mm-hmm.
I always ask people, because this was what really solidified it for me. And because then we have two issues. Then it's a matter of convincing people that this is their blockage, whether it's
that was actually going to be my next question, actually, because it's like, we know in our heart and in our soul, like, this is what they need, but it's convincing them and helping them to understand that is literally the hardest part. Like, it's so hard. So
there's a few ways so that I've found that this works really well, is really good questions. And then it leads the person to them find out the answers. Cause you can't
tell them, you have to let them get to the answer.
Right. Well, and where here's my thing, where it becomes ridiculously logical. Like, I'm all about the emotional side, but when it comes to this, it has to be logical. We make emotional decisions and validate it with logic and data. So my thing is, cause I'm not a big pusher on anything, whether my content or coaching, it doesn't matter. If I have to twist your arm, it's fine. You don't have to go apply this. I want it to be super logical. So here's how I would do it a lot. Cause this is why when I always said what I do is I help people never struggle losing weight ever again. Cause this is how they struggle. So that's what we're ending, is the struggle. But a question I ask people a lot is, I go, well, what if I said, let's play hypothetical for a second. If I could snap my fingers right now and the 50 pounds disappears, would you be good? Would it stay off? And everyone goes, no. And I go, oh, why? Mm-hmm. And they say, Well, I'd have no idea how to keep it off. Well, I'd still be binge eating. My relationship with food still be horrible. I'd be scared. I'd be so scared to eat calories back. The idea of going through a maintenance phase and coming out of my deficit is terrifying. I still hate myself, like all the issues. And I go, so if you just admitted that if you just admitted that magic genie powers would not fix your problems, like magic, poof, the weight's gone. If you just admitted that wouldn't solve your problems, why are we white knuckling through weight loss? And they go, oh. And I go, let me ask that question again. What if I could snap my fingers? Binge eating stops. Emotional eating stops. Self-deprecativeness stops. Your relationship with exercise and yourself and the scale and inner child, like all these things got fixed. Do you think weight loss would be that big of a deal? And they go, oh no. I go, exactly. It would be a byproduct. How would you like to lose weight as a byproduct? And they go, oh, that'd be dope. I go, cool. You need a diet from the inside out. Here is our list of criteria for dieting from the inside out. And then ironically, weight loss just happens because not binge eating anymore is a hell of a calorie deficit. Right. So, it's just one of those things. And usually by then people start to wrap their head around it. Because when we dive in, like, well, what's actually stopping you? I can't be consistent. Oh, because it sounds like maybe you have identity issues. Oh, well, I binge eat all the time. Ooh, because our relationship with food is messed up and we restrict. And oh, your identity is a binger. Maybe we need to work on that. So when we dig deep and ask these questions, a lot of the answers come to the other person pretty quickly.
Yeah. What would you say are like the most common barriers, the things that are getting in the way? Is it like you mentioned identity, self-sabotage, inner child?
Yeah.
I think honestly, I actually don't want to spend too much time on relationship with food and body because I feel like I talk about that stuff all of the time. So I feel like having you here, it might be better to kind of go deeper into like how you help people work through the self-sabotage, like why that's coming up, like kind of more of the psychological things. Yeah. Since it sounds like that's what you are most excited about.
Yeah, for sure. I actually just ended up, it wasn't quite in the realm of nutrition. It was for business. I actually just did a speaking engagement where I told a crowd of 700 people the reason their business isn't growing is because their identity is messed up. But the thing is though, it doesn't matter what the result is. I could say your business or the reason you're not losing weight or the reason your marriage sucks is because your identity is not in a good place. And the identity piece ties into sabotage arguably more than ever, because the reason we sabotage is because our identity is in a lower place than our current results. And then we unconsciously ruin it. The way that I like to put it, I'm stealing this from Ed Milet. Dude,
I love it. I was just listening to his podcast like 20 minutes ago.
Ed is the goat. I've seen him speak several times and he's just like the man. So he's the one I heard this first from, and it's the best description of your identity. Your identity is the thermostat on the wall. If you think about it, because this is where sabotage comes in with weight loss. If we talk about the thermostat on the wall, if your thermostat is set at 70 degrees and your room temperature is 70 degrees, what's your thermostat do? It shuts off because there's no reason for it to turn on. If it's set at 70 degrees and the room is 70 degrees, it's doing its job. But if my thermostat is set at 70 degrees and my ADHD brain leaves the door open on a summer day, which happens a lot, the room heats up to 80. My thermostat goes, wait, it's triggered, and it goes, we are not supposed to be here. And it does whatever it needs to do to cool the room back off to where it's set at. This is why sabotage happens in so many cases with weight loss, is because your mental thermostat is the not so great version of you, the heavy version, the I've always been fat, the I'm a binger, the I never losing weight's hard, whatever that story is, that self-image is of you. And then all of a sudden, if that's your thermostat, if that's your ground zero, it's where you're set at, then all of a sudden you start working with Tony. And then all of a sudden you start losing weight, doing really good. And like, oh, I'm losing weight, feeling good. Your identity is now threatened because now it's incongruence. And then you're going to, because we're on autopilot, psychology teaches us we're on autopilot 90% of the day. Then it's no wonder our actions are autopilot, incongruence with the old identity, and something will always happen. It's my favorite way to talk about this is binge eating is a big one we compare this to. There's a difference between binge eating and binger. One's a noun, one's a verb. I'm sorry, one's a verb, one's a noun. If I binge ate, that's just something I did. It's like putting on a hat. It's an action. But if you're a binger, what's going to happen when you go 2-3 weeks without binge eating? Well, now that's a threat to the identity of a binger, right? It's why if you're going through this game and you're like, I'm a worthless fat person because I can't get the weight to work because I've struggled my whole life. Well, that's your identity. Or if your identity is I'm a dieter or I'm this overweight person. Well, if that's your identity and you get, we'll call it lucky and lose some weight, that's the way your brain will view it. It will find a reason like clockwork to sabotage it. Then if you zoom out and objectively look at everything, you're going to find similar patterns. It's like, wow, 3 months on the dot, I always ruin it. Or every single time I do well, my kids get sick. Every single time I've hit that stride of finally making this happen, work gets busy. Mm-hmm. And it's no accident. This is there's a concept I teach. It's called the science of sabotage, because sabotage, people think it's this big, elusive, sneaky thing. No, it's this beast that has a paper trail that there's a science to it, and it shows exactly here's what happens every single time. So then we got to create systems in place to stop it, that most of you listening do in every other area in your life. So we just got to apply it in weight loss. So that's the big thing with why identity is basically regulates your life. A lot of people don't understand the relationship between your identity and subconscious mind. It's very much like a mother bear response, right? It's like mama bear, like the moms that listen to this show, like if someone messes with your kids, you're like, try me, I will destroy you. Well, here's what's crazy. It's the same relationship with your subconscious mind and your identity. Because when your identity is, I'm a 400-pound cow. That's just who I've always been or whatever. Because it's always judgy, self-deprecative in our own heads. So if you're like, I'm just worthless and I'm just a fat person, or I'm a binger, whatever the thing that doesn't serve you, well, then you lost some weight. It is now threatened. So unconsciously, you will find a way to defend that identity, and it'll all be completely unconscious, which is the scary part. That's why step one is, instead of fighting that like tooth and nail, we just shift your identity, and then we just stop sabotaging.
Yeah. So, okay. So I feel like there's so much said. So
it gets deep really quick.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is great. We need to, I think I want to go more into, like the steps that someone can take if they start noticing like that they are starting to self-sabotage, because I think the bigger problem, and what's most common, is especially when someone's not working with a coach, right? They kind of see it, and they almost like are like watching themselves self-sabotage, and then they kind of just like let go. And now it's like almost like back to square one. So what are some tips that you have if someone's starting to notice that they're kind of, dimming themselves going back to the old ways, the old habits? Yep,
absolutely. This is what I call tactics time, because this is the hard part where a lot of people struggle with teaching this, is because we're talking the intangibles. Losing 10 pounds, tangible. Benching 100 pounds, tangible. But fixing your sabotaging behaviors, it's like kind of elusive. Excuse me. So let's get tactical. This is what I call philosophically tactical, because it's like kind of philosophical, but what do I need to implement right now? So when it comes to sabotage and stopping it, there's a couple things. Number one, there's a precursor to sabotage. I call it drifting. Sabotage is when you're like, how did these 30 pounds get back on me? I don't even remember this happening. You know what I mean? That's when sabotage happened. I like to say drifting happens before sabotage. Drifting is when you don't notice it. Drifting is when you went from tracking calories to rounding calories. Drifting happens when you're starting to like talk, like, I know I should probably do my journal session. I'll do it later. And then you forget about it. It's when we start lowering standards, cutting corners, your actions start shifting. Like imagine if, like, totally different analogy, you're brushing your teeth, and let's say you have that timer on your tooth. Like my toothbrush has a 2-minute timer on it. You just start going, it's fine. I'll just do 1 minute. That was a drift. Here's why drifting is so scary. You don't know you're doing it. Here's the thing. If you're on a plane and the pilot drifts at 2 degrees, you do not notice it in the plane, but fast forward a 5-hour flight, you're in a different state. Because if you look at the 500 miles an hour for 5 hours, you are in a completely different destination. So this is why we have to be very, very specific with what are my actions, and holding my actions to the ambition in the new identity. That's how we hold those in place, but then holding ourselves accountable, or if you're working with a coach, that's what the coach is for. But making sure that we're not drifting. Sabotage, this is why you don't hear just sabotage, you hear subconscious sabotage. So the less you go subconscious, the better you're going to have a wrap on this. This is why you need to check in with yourself. You need to have some semblance of a standard. If you don't have a standard, it's no wonder you can't hit the target. You know what I mean? If someone says, I give you a great example. This is kind of a fitnessy example. because I sit my butt in this chair all the time, I don't walk as much as I should. So when I go to the gym, after my workouts, I walk for 20 minutes, nothing crazy. I usually are like on my phone. I swear 17 minutes is the hardest 3 minutes left. And I'm not doing anything hard. It's because I'm bored. I'm bored. And I'm like, it's fine. We're close enough. No, if I were to get off that treadmill, that's sabotage. That's a standard dropped. You know what I mean? It's almost like for the ladies listening, if your husband's like, I don't know if this is considered cheating. I'm sure it's fine. You know, it's like, he's like where flirting goes a little too far. And he's like, I can't tell if this is cheating. Maybe you as the wife go, no. If you have to question it, it is. That's not okay. That's a drift. He didn't, I'm not sleeping with her technically. I'm just, raunchy talking a little bit. Like, no. That is drifting in your marriage. Yeah. Right. And that will lead to the sabotage of the full blown cheat. It's the same kind of analogy here, which is why we have to stop the drift and you'll stop the sabotage. Then the next actionable piece, zoom out. What always happens? The science of sabotage is it always follows a pattern. If you shut off emotions for a second, I rarely ever say that, but shut off emotions for a second, look at just data over the last 5 years. Every time you've tried to lose weight, what always happens when you fall off? You'll find some common denominators. Oh, I do great. Then I step on the scale. Oh, I do great. Kids get busy. Oh, I do great. But then I always forget my gym clothes and then everything spirals from there. Or I do great and then I lose motivation. Or I do great and then something always happens. Well, now you need to write all those 5 things down. Now is when we get really tactical. There's a game I like to play. It's called If This, Then What? If this space, then what space? And now you take those 5 things and you literally map out a plan. If this happens, I step on the scale and I want to quit. Then what? I'm going to throw my 5-minute temper tantrum, hold space for whatever comes up, then not quit. Whatever it is, everyone's situation is going to be different, but you're playing the own fill in the blank. But here's where it gets powerful. You do this plan before you sabotage. So here's the analogy I like to give. This is for all the parents listening. Tony, do you have kids by chance?
A stepdaughter.
Okay, perfect. How old is she, if I can ask? 7. Oh my gosh, this is even perfect. So I'm going to ask you, Tony, if you haven't already, do you plan on having the sex, drugs, and peer pressure talk before that age becomes a thing?
Yes, unfortunately, I feel like, although she does have her mom and her father who probably should be doing that, and they will, but at some point I feel like I might be the more safer person for her to have that conversation.
Right. But why are you wanting to have that conversation before she goes into, let's say, 7th grade?
Because I want her to be prepared. I'm sure that's
I love it. That's perfect. It sounds like really great sabotage advice because you see a sabotaging potential that's proven to happen with all these other kids, around 6th to 8th grade, drugs are becoming a thing, peer pressure is becoming a thing, sex is becoming a thing. So you go, I don't want her to fall into that trap. I'm going to arm her and prepare her right now. And you literally lay out if this happens, they say, try this, then what? You're going to say no. Then they're going to say, it's fine. The cool kids do it. Then they're going to say, oh, do this. It's going to be so great. No one has to know. You're going to arm her because you know what's guaranteed to happen. Sabotage is no different. If you say objectively over the last 5 years, these 5 things always throw me off, go fill in the blank. If this, then what? If this, then what? If this, then what? But here's the powerful part. Don't wait till you're in the trenches. Yeah. When sabotage hits, it's an emotional place. It's an overwhelming place. Yeah. Like your stepdaughter in the heat of someone trying to give her drugs is not the time for her to decide, should I do this? Yeah. Or like when the bedroom becomes a thing, that is not the time to weigh pros and cons, right? It's no different with sabotage. This is where there's a term I like to use. We're working on apparel right now, so I'm actually probably going to put this on a shirt. It's one of my favorite quotes: "Stay ready, so you don't have to get ready."
Oh, I just talked about that.
Oh, there you go.
We just had a podcast. Well, I don't know when this comes out, but I just did a recording about this. Actually, it's probably coming out next week. But I don't know when this is going to go. Yeah.
It's a concept of staying ready, so you don't have to get ready. So
yeah, and actually, I talked a lot about this on the podcast, but I think there's a couple things I really want to kind of dissect a little bit because I think in order for this to work, if you're going to do this proactive plan and really think about like, if this, then what, all that, you also have to be really honest with yourself because like a lot of the reasons why weight loss or fat loss or whatever healthy lifestyle plan, whatever thing you've tried before, it probably hasn't worked because of two reasons. One, everything we just talked about, your identity, self-sabotage, feeling comfortable, all that stuff. But then two, I think it's important. I just want to acknowledge that 90% of the plans and programs out there really are not sustainable.
Trash.
And they really are not for you to be following. So you may have felt like you were a failure but really the diet failed you, like you didn't fail it. So I just do think that that's important too, because we want to take responsibility, obviously, for, what we know is going to work and what is not. But we also, I don't want people to think that they're always self-sabotaging because it's all because of themselves.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I know that's not what you're saying, but I just wanted to make sure we talked about that because there's a lot of stuff out there that really just is not meant to do long term.
Yeah. Well, if someone's following a 1,200 calorie keto diet while doing CrossFit 7 days a week, your identity is not why you can't.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not your identity at all. Actually, probably your identity of trying to fit that is probably the problem, actually.
100%.
Yeah. So
that's a really good point to bring up. So we'll say there's two sides to it, the sabotage. We'll call it the art and the science. The art of identity, your identity, all that stuff that I just talked about. But then the science of, all right, real talk. Is this could you actually do this for the next decade? No, don't touch it.
Right.
10-foot pole. If it's not, because that's I tell these people all the time, for most people, it's not their fault. They're struggling. No one's taught you how to do it. You literally think carbs store fat. That is not your fault because we're still, for some reason, operating out of diet culture from the 60s. Apparently it's 2023, but somehow carbs still store fat. But yeah, I would agree. That's the second side of it. You have the art side, identity, how you feel, self-worth, all that. But then the science, where it's you have to ask
the
yourself,
practicality.
Is what I'm doing sustainable? Is what I'm doing practical? Because you have to have both. You could be I've seen people follow the most sustainable, best plan ever, but because their identity is not in a good spot, they sabotage it. But then I've seen people who are just on the wrong plan. They're just doing a diet culture, trendy detox, 21-day fix piece of junk. And then it's no kidding. You can't sustain it because it's not practical. So
yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Glad we cleared that up because that's important, I think, for people to hear.
The two sides of it for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I guess, where do we want to go with this? We talked about identity. We talked about self-sabotage. I guess the practical things, I feel like I've covered a bazillion times. What are some of your biggest pet peeves in the industry, and how do you feel like you're different in delivering results for clients?
As corny as it sounds, this stuff, I don't know a single I'm trying to think how I can say this without sounding like a complete asshole. I don't know anyone else that built an entire coaching program around this. A lot of people that I know of, and don't get me wrong, there are some amazing coaches out there, right? So I'm not meaning everyone else but me sucks. You know what I mean? But most coaches don't know how to handle this. Most people, the average in the industry, to be honest, we work with a lot of coaches because they're trying to teach how to stop binge eating while they binge eat. And it's, you know what I mean? We work with a ton of therapists, I just signed up, I think this past week, 2 other weight loss coaches because they can't get this stuff figured out and they're in the trenches.
Because weight loss just doesn't work unless it can only work. Yeah. First of all, it should not be your main priority ever because it's not going to be the thing that changes your life. It's one of those things that I think so many people are trying to teach something that just doesn't even have to be a goal for everyone.
The problem is most people, I always say in my world, weight loss was the gateway that got us to the real transformational stuff, because the people who need inner work, emotional regulation, all this stuff the most aren't interested in it. Right. It's to be honest with you, back in the day when I started in business when I was 21, 22. I gave no cares in the world about reading. Personal development, I didn't want it. That was airy fairy. No interest in reading it. But as soon as I found out I make more money and my leadership skills get better when I read books, all of a sudden I'm a reader, because the idea of building my business and making more money and helping more people was the reason I got into reading and changed my life forever. So I needed personal development, but I wasn't interested. And I feel like it's the same thing here. The people who need this work the most, number one, has no idea how to get it. But number two, they're not as interested. But then when they find out, oh, if I heal my relationship with food, stop binge eating, start loving myself and start, learn how to sit with my emotions and hold space for things, I lose all the weight, bet. You know what I mean? When I explain our coaching program, I go, I will not let you go into stage 2. It's called boring fat loss until you finish dieting from the inside out. And they're like, I guess that's all I needed. A little bit of compliance. But, so I see the reason, like, to answer your question, I feel like number one, no one really knows how to teach it from a systematic approach. A lot of it is like advice, like just be more mindful, just go on a walk, just be more intuitive. Well, that's not helpful versus here's how to stop sabotage, these 5 action. Here's the 5 steps to fix your relationship with food, where it's not as ambiguous. But then I also feel like most people can't have a hard time balancing the trigger with the things we need to do to fix this thing. An analogy I like to give is this. It sounds illogical if I'm going to teach someone how to get over the fear of heights without getting on anything tall. That just doesn't make sense. Like, hey, you never have to get on anything tall, but I'm going to fix your fear of heights. Well, that doesn't even make sense because you have to get slightly triggered climbing the ladder to get over the fear of heights. You can't avoid it. And because the fear is the trigger, like we were talking about off camera, is the space that I found on accident with all of this is like that first question I ask people, if I could just get you to, if I could snap my fingers, 50 pounds comes off, would you be good? No. So the issue is most people have all this behemoth list of this inner game stopping them. Their food relationships, sabotage, binge eating, the whole night, like this list of 40 things that's stopping them from getting to where they want to be. But then my question is, does more weight loss make it better or worse? Well, if you binge eat, less calories makes it worse. If you know what to do, but don't do it, a better workout plan is not the answer. If you have a horrible relationship with food, a better meal plan is not the answer, right? Like all of those things. So more weight loss stuff and more results doesn't fix the issue. But here's where it gets tricky. Wanting to lose weight is the trigger for all of these things. This is why people know what to do, but don't do it in weight loss, but not with their job. They're fine with that. This is why they have balance in the areas in their life they thrive in the most, like their relationships or their kids. But the relationship with food is all or nothing mentality, right? It's interesting because the desire to want to lose weight is what triggers like clockwork, all these things. I've seen it a million times. Someone will get totally away from weight loss to go work with a food freedom coach or a therapist or whatever, and they'll get good and fixed. But then they come back to weight loss. They're like, all right, I'm good. I'm healed. I'm ready to lose weight again. And it triggers them like seeing their ex-boyfriend because they were too far removed away from the trigger. I could be zen as hell at the bottom of a ladder from a fear height standpoint. I could be like, man, I haven't gotten on a ladder in years. I'm so good with my emotions and my fear responses. But as soon as I get on the top of a roof, oh my gosh, it's going to trigger because it wasn't healed up there. In conjunction with the trigger. And I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark is they get too far removed from the trigger of losing weight. They get fixed or healed or whatever you want to call it, but then they come back to weight loss. All those things trigger, which is why what we do is in the same container, fix all of this, but it's what I call a staged process. It's stage 1, stage 2, but it's still in the same container. So we're getting them mildly triggered around some of this stuff because now we can sit with that. Now we can do the work around those triggers to permanently fix this. But otherwise, avoidance never made anything better. So I think that's where the magic happens. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and then I think there's also something to be said that you can choose either option. Like you can choose either way, but it's making sure that you're choosing it because of an understanding of truly what you want for your life, like versus afraid of like, I don't know, going off the rails or, cause the reality is that not everybody you can have healthy habits and be healthy and you don't necessarily need to lose weight. And when you're saying weight, we've been saying weight loss a lot, but I feel like we should be really more so saying fat loss because at the end of the day, like, I know that's what you mean because like that really becomes a choice. But if you don't, you might get to that healed place and decide that you really genuinely, you don't want to get back there. You don't like, there's no, why, what's the point? Like, does it really matter that much to you? But I think I like what you're saying, like, and that's where
even like having a scale, and some people, some people will tell you to throw it out and never look at it. And then other people say like, you need to weigh every day. I feel like you can decide what your relationship is with that scale. If you can get on it and it doesn't trigger you to go into the extremes, I think that's a good relationship, and you don't necessarily need to cut out the scale from utilizing it. So sure. I think it's important for people to understand, like they can define what they decide and what they want to do.
Yeah. My biggest issue with usually a lot of people in this specific area, because of a struggle, they go straight to avoidance. I can't step on the scale without getting triggered. I'm never going to weigh myself forever again. But then every Tuesday when they feel fat, they weigh themselves and get triggered, or they go to the doctor every year and they weigh themselves or whatever. Or they're struggling with weight loss or fat loss, and they're struggling with whatever. And it's like, you know what? I'm just going to get rid of this But my thing is, when healing this stuff and really dieting from the inside out, it's like any other relationship. When you're fixing your relationship with yourself, you're fixing your relationship with food, you're fixing your relationship with the scale, you're fixing your relationship with exercise. It's going to be gross because there's a trigger there. My therapist calls it poking the bruise. Like if all of a sudden something's in therapy, I'm in therapy, and all of a sudden I'm getting like I can feel like getting a little choked up, or like I'm wanting to cry or whatever. It's something needs to be seen. It's this thing that there's something there. The worst thing I could do is avoid it. If my wife and I are having issues, the last thing we want to do is avoid it. But this is where it's individual, but we got to be careful, because our first inclination is to avoid uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think avoidance is the reason why a lot of people are so deep into their distorted relationship with food in their body, is because, and they're trying to mask it with a diet or with an extreme, only to come back to like feeling like they're starting over from square one, and then they just avoid it, and they pretend like they're fine. They don't care. They don't care. It goes they're either all in or they're all out. It's like, and that's how they stay stuck.
Yep. It's the thing most people need to realize is you spend a lot of time we naturally do this on both extremes, but never in the middle. And what I mean by that, it's easy to say, I'm never going to have Oreos again, because it takes no bandwidth. Or it's easy to go, screw it, I'm going to have all the Oreos and start over Monday. It takes the most willpower and bandwidth to go, I'm going to have 2 Oreos, and I'm going to have the desire to eat the whole pack because that's all I've ever done. But I'm going to choose to have 2 and fix this. That's so uncomfortable, but that's the only way to do it, because psychology teaches us that the mind and nervous system crave what's most familiar. So for most people that are been engulfed in diet culture for decades or years, they've lived, chances are, in the screw it end, in just like start over Monday, all the things, or none of the things, which is why let's do a little bit of work to fix your relationship with food. Let's ease up the intention on trying to lose weight and just focus on fixing our inner game first as it applies, and the weight loss will come. Man, that's so uncomfortable for most people, but it's what has to be done. But you have the least amount of experience for most people in that middle ground. But the middle ground is where the magic happens. Everything good has a dichotomy. It's why for most people, if you look at objectively at the areas in your life you crush with, that you're the most successful, you ironically have the most amount of balance and harmony with. It's when we don't, is when we pull the all or nothing card. I'm an all or nothing person because we're about to make a bad decision. So,
yeah, 100%. This is so good. Okay. Anything else you want to add or share with the listeners before you wrap up?
I don't know anything in particular. I mean, I feel like we've gotten into a lot. I love it.
If there's anything else you want to share, feel free. If not, just let people know where they can find you so they can ask you any questions.
If you guys like this kind of stuff, you should totally follow my podcast, Dieting from the Inside Out. It's everywhere. But we just did launch our website for that. So dietingfromtheinsideout.com. And we even have all episodes transcribed into a blog, and everything the podcast touches is that hub of dietingfromtheinsideout.com, or just search it wherever. If you'd like this kind of content in like your feed of like Instagram and TikTok kind of stuff, at Real Jared Hamilton is my handle. And that's where I hang out most days. So
awesome. Cool. All right, guys, make sure you give Jared a follow. And if you're not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can get notified when a new episode comes out. As always, this is Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.